and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and today we're going to be talking about user-defined functions. I'm on record as saying that I find working with user-defined functions clunky, and I've gotten some feedback from people like, "Well, why do you find them clunky, Greg?" Well, I'm going to get into exactly why and hopefully show how they're very clunky to work with. Now, there is additional documentation other than this extremely short article, which hilariously is named exactly the same. But you start going down through here, and there is a lot to absorb about user-defined functions, right? And how they work, and lazy evaluation, and eager evaluation, and all kinds of stuff, which I go back to, and maybe this is a subject for a different video, so I won't belabor it here, but I think this suffers a lot from tech bias in terms of all the people out there that are hyping the UDFs and that are very technical people that probably live in code to a large degree. But is the average business Power BI user, is the average business user, are they going to want to absorb and learn all of this, on top of measures and everything else and DAX and all of that? I don't really see it. And I think this UDFs suffer from this tech bias that is prevalent within technical products, in terms of, the coverage of them out in the community, is that the business aspect of it doesn't get covered nearly. It gets drowned out by all these technical people, like, oh, this is the greatest thing, and geeking out over this stuff. Um, but I'm really more interested in like practical use of these things. And I just think that over like lately, the Power BI team has been coming out with features that appeal to an incredibly low percentage of Power BI's user base, like 1% or less. I mean, you really think about like what they released in the September release, the calendars, right? Which anybody that's using a fiscal calendar has already solved that problem. So I don't know why that appeals to anyone. They had a mobile thing that GA'd, which I didn't even think people used the mobile app anymore. I mean, probably more people used Cortana than use the Power BI mobile app. I don't know anybody that uses it personally. So anyway, and then this in these user-defined functions I've covered in a previous video. I just don't see maybe 1% of semantic models or users actually doing anything with this. But that 1% happens to be extremely vocal on LinkedIn and other platforms, right? So anyway, that's a subject for another video. So let's get into this. Let's get into these UDFs. So I've got my September 2025, right? That has my UDFs that I've defined so far, and like right, we're in this in DAX query view, and you can take something like this very trivial, like define and evaluate this very trivial thing, right? That all we're doing is doing a date diff between 1971 and the date time that's passed in seconds, right? So Unix, epoch or epoch if you're in the UK, right? So now down here, now I can't just run this; it's going to error, right? There it is. So I need to come in here and modify this to something like now, right? And then I can run this, and I get an answer, right? And I can do things like put in date 1971, right? And I can run this. I get 0, as I should, right? So, I think for trivial things like this, that this is a minimum, it's the minimum of what you need, right? However, if you want to start to like, well, how's this going to interact with other visuals and filters and slicers and other things like that, and in the context of this table that I have of date time values, right? How is it going to interact with that? And the answer is, are you really going to want to sit here in this evaluate and put in summarized columns and put in all of those different scenarios, right? Or do you really want to like troubleshoot this in the report view and be able to like, oh, here's my date times that I have, right? Get this, and then I can create a measure. Did I even create a measure for that one? And we'll do that one. New measure. Oh, I do have a convert to epoch. And so what's the definition of it? Okay, it's just now. So then I have to modify this to be max of dates date, right? Then I can add this into my visual, right? And then I can see how it operates, and if I have some filters on this page. But it's very difficult to do that being in DAX Query View. You have to write code for every test case that you want to test out, which again, that's great for technical folks, right? But is the average business user, the average author of Power BI reports going to want to bother with that? And I think the answer is no, to be honest. So now let's take another, now let's table that for a second. And now we have this TM function, right? This is not a trivial function. And the question is like, so if you inherit a PBX file with this in it, are you just going to trust that this works the way it's supposed to work, right? Or are you going to want to try to dissect it and understand what it's doing? And then again, like, are you really going to, is this interface, this evaluate interface and getting back tables of, is that really how you want to test this thing out? Right. And then, yeah, if you want to into like dissect what's going on, and you want to see what is in this final rank bottom table, right? Then you're going to want to, you have to change the definition of this UDF, right? And in order to make it, return this a 2 CSV, let's say, of this table, right? You is that, and then evaluate it all here, and you have to be updating the UDF with the model changes, and then or running it, as you change this thing. It just seems like a very clunky way of troubleshooting and doing this versus, if you have a measure like this trim mean measure is right here, and I want to be able to 2 CSV or do anything, I can just 2 CSV, whatever I want to, and pops back out in the context of an actual use case, right? So this seems like a far better way of doing it in terms of debugging it is as a measure. And to the point that, let's say you have this definition, right? And one of the things is it's got some hard-coded values in here, right? See these? And then down here, there's some more values, and then here's another one, right? So the question becomes is like, well, so okay, so you need to change this definition up here where really this needs to be a select columns, right? Select columns, and then add a TM table, and then the column you want to select, let's say we want to call it __ value, and then we want this TM column reference right here, right? And that way we know that, we've created this. And a lot of times I like to put underscores in front of, the things that I create, just to make sure that they're unique. Because a lot of times DAX can get confused. If you name too many things the same thing, DAX tends to get confused sometimes, so I try to avoid that. That's why anything I create, I try to put the underscores in. But now, how do I know? Like, because the UDF doesn't know what's in this table that I'm passing in, right? It can't know because I can pass whatever I want to into it, right? So how do I know that? And so I have to go and scurry through, like, and scroll through and hope that replace this with __ value, right? Have to go through all of this, right? And hopefully I get them all. But some of them are underlined, some of them are not, right? I could miss one pretty easily versus come up here to trim mean, and I do the same thing where I select columns out of TM table, and then I want to select the name of that and I want the value column, bed. There we go. Now in this case, right, this is underlined, right? And maybe this is a bad example because maybe the ranks table. So right, I mean, so this is value. So again, this is add groups value count max. So I need to replace this. There we go. So you don't get any of this type ahead. You don't get any of this within, right? So I know this is valid versus back here and here, I try to do the same thing and I go, right? Okay, so it does show up that it's value, right? It knows that, all right? So that's not bad. But again, how do I know that I've gotten all of the ones that I need to get, right? So I think that, so let's see if we can, so this is wrong. Let's see if we got column value cannot be found in this expression. So where's that coming from? Probably this. Again, I don't know why. This is probably, nope, it doesn't like that. Doesn't like that. Oh, duh. There we go. All right, so that's fixed up there, right? So, but I can see, like, I can see the changes, right, as I'm going, and so obviously I've screwed something up, right? Because these are wildly off, right? So this is what I mean. Are you going to try to like troubleshoot this in this view to try to emulate the same thing of what's going on, or is it better to do it here visually where you can immediately see the results of your changes, right? So it seems to me that, like, you know, you're going to want to do it here and troubleshoot. It's going to be a lot easier to do it here and troubleshoot it here than back in the DAX query view, at least for the average user, right? And like, for example, this one, this is max percents table. This probably, when we actually would convert this over, we would want this to just come in. You'd want this to just come in as a numeric value versus as we did it initially, kind of as a table, right? We replaced this. We did the bare minimum we could to get this thing into a form that, that we could use it as a UDF, essentially, is what I'm saying. But we'd want to do a lot more, right, than that, right, and to really convert this properly to a UDF, I think. So there you have it. This is what I mean by, like, you're going to be like jumping back between, yes, you could do everything in this DAX query view in theory, right? But boy, what a pain to like have to do that and have it, like, if I want to explore like how this interacts with a slicer, like where I can do this, right? I can do this pretty easily and test it out and see if I'm getting the right results or not, especially if I can do two CSVs of things like that. Versus here, I got to write all of that code and all that interactivity and stuff into every test case, right? Which seems really, again, really clunky to me to have to do it that way. Versus debugging it here in this, this makes it a lot nicer, a lot easier to add the elements that I want to have it interact with this thing and change this thing around, right? So that is what I mean by clunky. It's a lot of, I think it's going to be a lot of going back and forth. You're going to do, again, anything complex, you're going to want to do in this interface anyway, versus trying to debug it and do all this stuff in this view. This doesn't seem very nice or intuitive to me, that you have to kind of basically write every test case as a DAX expression. That doesn't seem good at all. That seems very clunky to me. And business users and your normal average users aren't going to want to mess with it. So that is it. That is all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you understand what I mean by clunky now. But yeah, that's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.